Oh, hi! I'm Jen Tripp, Executive Director of the Arlington Chamber of Commerce. Each month, the Chamber hosts a women's networking and breakfast event. Our first speaker of 2014 was Amy Matias of Matias Counseling, who presented Tune In and Tune Up Your Life. Amy showed us how to set priorities, identify roadblocks, and stay on track personally and professionally. I hope you enjoy it.
I wanted to start actually by sharing a little bit of my story today because I think it's relevant to what I'm talking about today. Most people are very curious as to how I went from becoming a biochemist to becoming a social worker, which is, you wouldn't think that would happen. What my story is about 3 years into my doctorate program, I started to realize I didn't want to do what you did with a PhD in biochemistry. It was very hard work, and I didn't really like it, so I had a vague sense that I wanted to work with people. So about 3 years in, I started having these thoughts and doubts, and at the same time, my father died of cancer, and this really changed my life, which I think probably a lot of you have this experience that you're going along life, and then something changes your trajectory. And you know, my dad was a really responsible dad. He worked really hard. He worked at work. He worked on our home. He did a lot of things that kept him busy. And I think his diagnosis really woke him up. And he had an epiphany that he was kind of doing it all wrong. And he shared this with me, which was, I think, very life-changing for me. And it really showed me a different way to live. And it gave me permission to seek something different for myself. It really opened up new possibilities for me. And so I decided to finish my doctorate, and I'm a finisher. And from there, I went out of research, and I did patent law for 6 years. And in that time, I got a lot of help and some therapy, and decided what other direction I wanted to take. And eventually, I took a social work course and finally felt like I was a fish in water. And it was really wonderful. So, and I feel like right now, my experience is coming full circle, because at this time, there's a whole bunch of information coming out about the brain and the mind, and we're using that now in terms of psychotherapy and what best practices can help people in terms of how to work with different parts of the mind and the brain. And so as I was thinking about what I was going to talk about today, I was remembering our past 2 networking events. And in September, Kathy did a wonderful presentation on health and food, and some of you probably had a chance to taste her delicious smoothie recipes. And then Barb Davis, where's Barb? Last time spoke about our financial wellness and our financial health. So I noticed this theme of wellness. And I was really impressed with the way Barb brought our attention to things we really don't like to think about, like wills and life insurance and the possibility that something we don't want to have happen might happen. And I think that was a really, you know, I remember sitting there myself thinking, oh, I've got to think about this stuff. And I think it's the same with our mental emotional health. And it's, you know, we say, I'll get to that when, but the problem is the when never comes, or the when is when something terrible happens. So as women, I really notice where I work with a lot of women in my practice. And I think in general, women have trouble putting themselves first. And we care for our children and our families and our spouses and the home, and we work, and we often fall to the bottom of the list. And the thought of self-care or doing that project we want to do remains on the back burner, and we say, oh, when I have time. But I think sometimes the time doesn't come, and we end up not living the life we really want to live. And I think that's really important, because the effects of not getting what we need on a consistent enough basis have cumulative consequences. And research shows that if we ignore our self-care, our mental, emotional, spiritual, physical well-being, that eventually we see effects in our life, in relationship, in our job performance, our stress levels, and ultimately, I think, our health. And we don't really prioritize sometimes what's most important to us. And we, sometimes it takes a crisis to kind of wake us up. A crisis at work, a crisis with our health, perhaps a divorce. And I think, getting back to my father, I think what I learned from my dad was that we really do need to live each day to the fullest and enjoy our moments with each other and pursue our interests to the best of our ability. And I think at that time, when I was 20-something, 23, I had no idea how to do that. It's really hard. I don't think it's easy in our culture today, and it takes really consistent effort. And with my clients, I often have them, work on these programs where they try every day to focus on what's in front of them and what they really want to change. And so we obviously won't solve all this in the next 30 minutes for all of you, but today I wanted to give you a taste of the tools, some of the tools I use in my practice to help you tune in to what's really inside so that you can move forward in your life. And the other thing I wanted to do really briefly is just give you a little bit of understanding for why these tools actually work. Because I think, it's tools around mindfulness, and, it can seem a little hokey. So, but there's evidence coming out now that the things that we've been doing for thousands of years and people say work, we know why they work now. So I'm going to go over here and I drew this on the board. Some of you are probably familiar with the whole left brain, right brain idea. So our left brain, there really are two distinct parts that work in different ways. Our left brain is more of the logical, thinking, reasoning, problem-solving part of our brain. And the right side is more the emotional, perceptive, intuitive. You can kind of feel it as like this gut reaction that you get, sensory. So it's more like on a different level. So, and the thing is that both sides of your brain are making decisions for you throughout the day. And the way that happens is, you can probably think about, we have so this is the conscious side. We have conscious thought that is very active. We think things over, we mull them over, they take time. And on this side, the unconscious decisions occur below our level of awareness. We're actually not aware when our unconscious mind makes a decision, and it happens instantaneously. And one of the best examples that you can probably all relate to is the fight or flight response. This is a response that wham, you're there, and it happens instantaneously, and it's not a decision that you thought about. So one example I like to give is in terms of, say, a firefighter, a fire chief going into a fire with his men. And so he's in there, and then all of a sudden he gets a sense that he's got to get his men out. So he gets his men out. And so this is a right brain decision. If he were to be asked in that moment why he's getting his men out, he couldn't be able to tell you because it's this right brain decision that's disconnected from his thinking. And if he had actually thought about it, if he had stopped to think about, oh, I need to get my men out, he might have lost some men. So it's this really snap decision, and it's based on that firefighter's learning and experience that all gets stored perceptually in this right side of the brain that he can access. And another, less fight or flight focused example I like to give is from the book Blink by Malcolm Gladwell. And he gives this example of graduate students who have spent years to detect fake artwork, and to the point where they can look at a piece of art and say, that's a fake. But if you were to ask them the same thing in that moment, why it's a fake, they can't tell you. So it's just this instantaneous kind of body-mind memory. Let's see, and so there's this other part of the emotional side. So it gives us, our likes and dislikes, our passions, interests, our values, our feelings, and our motivation. It kind of draws us toward or away from something. And I think the trouble is that we're so busy and distracted or anxious a lot of the time in our culture that we don't tap into all of this. And it can be very good stuff. And the way we can do that is using mindfulness tools. And so they know now that mindfulness practices such as meditation or guided imagery, visualization, affirmations, or cognitive therapy, actually, the way it works is that we engage the left brain in observing the right. So what it does is it actually forms connections between these two parts of the brain. And we can actually measure that now with new imaging technology. And the neuronal connections just become thicker in this area. And so in monks or nuns in contemplative practice have much thicker areas of the brain than people who do not meditate. And I think what this does is it gives you a sense of, what's inside that you can use as a guide. And it can also help, and I work with a lot of people who have problems with the right brain and due to traumatic or dysfunctional or negative experiences. And it can actually give you wrong information for what's really going on now. So it can actually help you be more aware of that, and so you begin to have more choice over what you're actually going to do. It can help create that pause before your reaction. So I hope that wasn't too much. And I will refer to this a little bit.
Do you have a layman's book or resource about
Yeah,
that?
I do. There's a couple really good ones. Dan Siegel is in California, and he does a lot of this stuff. I really like his book called Mindsight. It's all about this ability of how meditation, a lot of what I talk about comes from his work.
Okay, great,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So, let's see. Any questions about that? No?
I think it was just right.
Okay, good. Thank you. We'll be done. So what I hope to have time for today is to do 3 different exercises with you that give you a taste of how you can use mindfulness to tune in and create the life you want. And it's kind of like a psychotherapy sampler plate. So first I want to walk you through a visualization exercise. And this is meant to tune you into what's most important to you. And since this is a women's networking event, I decided to focus on work. And it's really just a tool to begin to use your right brain as a guide. And it's about 4 or 5 minutes, and I'm going to read it to you. And so if you're comfortable, get yourself seated so that you're in a nice, comfortable position. Shifting your weight so that you're feeling supported. And if you're comfortable, gently allowing your eyes to close. Inhaling deeply and slowly, and breathing out fully and completely. And again, breathing in, and breathing out. Any unwelcome thoughts that come to mind, just send them out with a breath, so that just for a moment, your mind is clear and empty space. Slowly, you become aware of a soft presence beside you, very warm and comforting. And maybe this is someone or something familiar, or maybe not. But this presence is clearly radiating love and trust and support. And you know that this visitor has your best interest at heart. This visitor informs you that you have 1 year to live, but in that year, you are to stay working and have exactly the work you want. The visitor asks you to imagine the type of work you would be doing. What work environment would you like to have? Maybe you enjoy your work and want to take it to the next level. Maybe you want to approach your work with a different attitude. Maybe you have some idea that you are meant to be doing something different. Allow yourself to imagine your perfect work environment. Where are you? What does the space look like? Are you working independently or with other people? What are you doing? Are you perhaps working in service to others? Or with information or technology? Are you doing something artistic or expressive? How much are you working and what hours of the day? Picture the scene of your perfect work environment. Place yourself in it. What does it feel like? Involve as many senses as you can. Allow yourself to absorb the scene in front of you. The visitor invites you to put a frame around this scene and to slowly allow it to shrink so that you can put it in your pocket. As your frame gets down to the right size, take it and place it in your pocket. Take the picture out and look at it. Then put it back in your pocket, knowing it is there for you whenever you want to revisit it. Your visitor nods and smiles at you, showing you admiration and respect. Notice the visitor fading into the background. And so, bringing your attention back to your breath, breathing in and breathing out. Aware now of your hands and feet and the support of the chair beneath you. And very gently, when you are ready, allowing your eyes to open.
Oh, I'm still here.
Hi. Okay, thank you. Thank you for participating in that. So I left some paper, so the big paper, not the note card yet. So maybe grab the pen or pencil in front of you and just take a few minutes to jot down what came up for you. Sometimes I found this exercise to be very hard if somebody really doesn't like where they're at. You know, I found sometimes that happens. Hopefully that wasn't you. So if anybody's brave enough to share an item that came up, it might be too private.
job. And what's nice in that exercise, in the visualization, I visualize where I am
Where you are.
and what I'm doing.
Yeah.
The
Wow.
contentment.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm older, so I think that's part of it. My path has taken to me where I feel like I'm meant to be, and it taps into all the different things that I've done over time, even being a financial analyst,
Wow.
when I'm a people person,
That's great.
introvert versus extrovert, but now those skills and that experience are really helpful in realizing sometimes if we don't like where we are, it's part of the path to getting where we are.
It is. I think it is part of the path.
It's wonderful how you walked us through that, so thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So you really found that.
It was validating.
Yeah, it was validating and looking over your history and finding, oh, I'm right where I'm supposed to be, which is that's so wonderful. Thank you. Yeah.
Kind of reaffirming when you start a new year and you have all
Yes.
these goals ahead of you that
Right.
seem overwhelming.
Yes.
Remember, Barb, where you need to be.
Yeah.
So relax.
It's
Right.
good enough.
Right.
It's good enough right now.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. And the piece with your mom, that's really nice. That's really nice. Anybody else? I'll take maybe one more.
My name is Sally, and I'm a professional organizer. I feel like I'm at AA. But, and I have been for 5 years, but I ducked out for about a year or so ago. And I feel like the last year has been this process of reaffirming that this is what I like to do. I didn't like the way I was doing it. I changed a lot of that. So in that respect, it's nice to go back over while you were talking about the steps that I had taken and to get me here where I'm happy. However, there's one more thing I want to do. I like to make jewelry, and I have this vision that someday I'm going to have an online store.
Oh,
And
nice.
so that's my next step in my quest.
That's great.
That's
And you're
awesome.
able to see yourself doing
Yes,
that.
I
That's
mean,
great.
I've already kind of put it together, and
Yeah.
it's just a little
It's, yeah, it's inside.
Yeah.
It's inside. Yeah, I found that too with my path. I really felt like I was leaving the biochemistry behind, and it was hard because I'd invested so much in it. And now I can look back and say, oh my gosh, it's all, I'm right where I'm supposed to be.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
all coming together.
Right.
And so
And
that
it's
feeling
good
is.
to kind of, at this age,
Yeah.
to say, okay, well, we've accomplished something. I mean, at this age, we've all accomplished
That's right.
something.
We've all accomplished a lot.
I'm not assuming that you nice young people are this, but.
Thanks, Sally.
I feel like, we've earned a bit,
Yeah, we have. We
Yeah.
have, I think. And I think as you go along, life teaches you those lessons of, of trusting maybe a little bit
Yeah.
in your path. And so what you just did is you made brief contact with the right brain and used it as an inner guidance system. And I think, as I mentioned before, sometimes we're knocked out of the left brain into the right brain by circumstances, like some kind of a crisis. And it forces us to take stock of where we are and what's important. But I think hopefully what this exercise shows is that we don't necessarily need a crisis to tap into that stuff and harness the power of your emotional brain to access what's important to you. And then to proactively create the life you want from that place. And using the mindfulness practices, such as this imagery exercise, can actually create more choices for yourself and create a path and create new behaviors that you might want to focus on. And I think those all go into living our values and what's most important to us. I'm sure most of you have heard of the book 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey, and he talks about that you have to have first a mental creation of something before you get the physical creation of it. And he talks about that you can't have the physical creation. You can't have this thing in your life that you want without first kind of imagining it and holding it in your mind and saying, giving it some focus and attention. So I think that's also kind of what these exercises do for us. And from the mental image, we can manifest something in our lives. And I'm going to next share a client story with you. This client's name is Julie. I worked with her a few years ago. And, of course, that's not her real name. And Julie came to me because for years she'd been trying to lose weight. And she was also having nightmares due to past sexual abuse she'd experienced as a child. And Julie was a very hard worker in therapy, and she began a daily program of guided meditation and visualization, asking herself, what would my life look like if I lost the weight? And Julie really paid attention and began to journal every day about this question. What would her life look like if she were actually thin? And within a matter of weeks, she began to do some of these things. She began to live as if she had lost the weight. And first she came in and she'd been started dressing a little more attractively. And then she started knitting every day and giving herself time to knit. And that was a hobby she really loved as a child. And after that, she began dancing again with her husband, which led to greater intimacy in their relationship. And Julie, so now I'm moving more on to the cognitive therapy piece. She had to engage her left brain in making some of this happen. And I'll use her as an example as I walk you through the exercise. So again, Julie is using her right brain to kind of keep her on track and create this life that she wants, as if she were thin. And a lot of times when we try to do something new, our past experience comes up and says, oh no you don't, I'm not going there, don't try. And this can come from some negative experiences that we have early on that maybe taught us not to try or not to trust. I don't know if some of you can relate to that. These unconscious messages that can really come up and stop us in our tracks. And we can't seem to override that gut reaction that says, no, don't go there. And I call this an emotional roadblock, when you really want something and you can't seem to make it happen. And so the next exercise, so grab another piece of paper, the big paper, and just, let's see. Just put a line at the top, leaving a little space, and then a line like that. So this is, you're going to put up here, well, I'll walk you through it, but up here is going to be one of your statements, and then this side is for negative thoughts, and then on this side we're going to practice trying to make some positive thoughts. So for example, with Julie, she had to really work with some of this, and so to live her life as being thin, one of the items I said was she chose to dress more attractively. And as she thought about doing that, some negative thoughts come up, such as, I'll attract unwanted attention. I'm not safe. And that comes from her abuse as a child. And so you did the visualization exercise, and maybe pick one of those items that you identified in your visualization, like something that you really want, something that you want to do, and put that in this space at the top. You know, for example, I want a sunnier space to work in, or I want a new job, or whatever it is, and take a minute to write that on the top of the paper. And so next, when you have that item at the top of the page, so on the left-hand side, just notice some of the negative thoughts that come up about making that thing happen, and write them on the left column. Notice the I can't, or that's impossible, or the I don't have time, things like that. And if you have more than one negative thought, write them all down. Write that one down too. So my client Julie engaged her powerful thinking brain to counter some of the fears that came up for her, and helped her make these changes. So around the negative thought, I'll attract unwanted attention, it's not safe, she was able to say to herself, so on the right-hand column, this is what she would have written: dressing more attractively does not make me unsafe. I was abused as a child, but I can wear clothes and feel good about, I have a typo, about it without being victimized. I deserve to feel good about the way I look. So for example, that's what Julie might have written. And she also did some things around knitting. And her negative thought was, I don't have time, I'm so exhausted by my work, I can't do it. And her positive thought was, this is something I know and I want to do. I won't know if it works until I try. I can start with 15 minutes a day and see how it goes. So you can see how she kind of just gave herself permission to start in a little way. And as she went along, it grew. And so I call this the reality check. And you first start with the negative thought, and then ask yourself, is this really true? Is this thing that I fear really true? Because oftentimes our fears are much worse than the reality. There's actually this great phrase I like, I don't know where it came from, but it's an old man coming to the end of his life, and he says, I suffered a lot in my life, and most of it never happened. I really like that one, because I can so relate to that.
Is that Mark Twain?
Mark Twain, okay, thank you. Now I know. Now I know. I'll have to remember that. So you can engage kind of your reasoning mind and say, should this really be holding me back? And actively work with your negative thoughts. And this is a way of, so instead of bringing up the positive emotional side, we're bringing up that muck that kind of keeps us stuck, the unconscious muck. And this is one of those exercises for the mind that mindfulness, it's like doing calisthenics for your brain. And what it's doing is it's actually creating new thought patterns in your mind. And if you think of, ripples through the sand, the deeper you dig into the sand, the more water is going to go down that path, right? And the little ones that are not as deep aren't going to carry the water. And so in a way, that's what you're doing with your mind. You're strengthening these new neuronal pathways, and they get stronger and stronger as you practice challenging yourself in these old ways of thinking. And the old ones actually over time get weaker, and your brain actually prunes them away. So for example, if you used to practice piano every day and then you stopped, your brain notices, oh, I'm not practicing piano anymore. I'm gonna prune all that stuff away. I don't need that anymore. And it's the same with these thoughts. You can actually really create a more positive way of thinking, and it results in this physical structure in your brain, which I find really amazing. And it helps us override that negative thinking place. So how is that for people? Okay, does anyone want to share one? I don't know what time we have. Okay, maybe I'll just keep going. So that's a cognitive exercise you can use to kind of work with your negative thoughts. So in the last few minutes, I have one more exercise that has to do with making affirmations. And this is part of being proactive in your life to make the changes you want. And like I said before, I think it actually takes really persistent effort to make changes. I know it has for me. And for me, when I've had to, when I've really had something I want to change, I have to really keep that vision right in the forefront of my mind, and even every day visit it and focus on this is what I want, so that I can line my choices throughout the day to that. And so this is the way that you take that mental picture that Stephen Covey talks about and make it a reality. And so you need a daily practice to do that, or almost daily practice. And so affirmations are a good way to do that. And again, it's a good way to connect the left and the right sides of the brain, the conscious and the unconscious. And that keeps you on track. So I have one more little client story to read. This is Karen. She's 52 years old, and she's been in sales for about 20 years. Although she likes aspects of her work, she had a sense that she wants to be doing something more creative. She was artistic and felt in her gut that she needed to move into the designing area of her field. She had a boss who was very authoritative and domineering. This boss intimidated her and reminded her of her father, who would explode if provoked. Karen would avoid him at all costs and even stay home from work on days she thought she might not do a good job. Karen grew up poor and was also terrified of leaving the security she had. No matter how she tried, she could not confront her boss and take the steps to leave. So Karen created an affirmation around this that she tried to work with every day. And her affirmation went a bit like this: I am taking steps toward getting a new job. Working in the field of design excites me, and I know I am good at it. I can see myself telling my boss I'm leaving when the time is right. And so this is something that she kept right in front of her every day. And a good affirmation has 5 ingredients, and this is also from the Stephen Covey book. It's about you, so that means it's an I statement, and it's positive. It's in the present tense, it's visual, and it's emotional. And I think that's in one of the handouts in the front page that I gave you. So just take a minute and maybe try to take the thing that you chose for your visualization and your cognitive exercise and maybe start an affirmation around it. And just give it a try. And this is what you put on the 3x5 card. Actually, it's like a 4x6 card.
Oh.
You can start it on your scrap paper and then transfer it there. I had a client a long time ago who had childhood, came from a dysfunctional family, and he carried around a card with him for about a year that talked about how he was a good person, and he'd pull it out of his wallet and read it. He wrote it on the back of his business card, and it made a really big difference in his life, as he had this sense that he wasn't a good person. So as you work on this affirmation, you can put it on a 3x5 card. I know the card I gave you is very large, and feel free to cut it in half and put it in 2 different places, but you can post it somewhere in your house, like your mirror or your dashboard, or maybe your date book. And I've had people even put them in their phones, in their reminders on the phone, so that it'll come up and remind you every day on the phone, and you have a chance to read it. And the last thing you can do, the last thing I'll mention, is that from this affirmation, if you just take a minute or 2 and sit with it and close your eyes, take a deep breath, and visualize it coming true, that will affect your life going forward. Eventually you'll find that it feels a little easier to do this thing that's so hard for you, and that's because you're working with this right side, this perceptual side, and shifting that part of you so that eventually you can really make some differences. So I know we're short on time, so I'm going to just summarize as you're working, and say that mindfulness practices can improve our mental and emotional health by helping us tap into our inner guidance systems to identify what we value most. These practices connect our conscious observing mind to our unconscious so that we can make the things we want most a reality in our lives. I think that's what it's really about. They can also help us redo our unconscious negative thinking so that we have a greater range of choice in our lives. And this connection of unconscious to conscious is the key to being able to interrupt automatic negative reactions and responses that we don't like. I know I've had some in my life. And I just want to make one mention of that if you have something like this that you're trying to work on and you just seem like you can't make any progress, I would say that means you have one of those emotional roadblocks in the way, and you might think about getting some help with it, whether it's a coach or a therapist or some outside help, because sometimes we really can't see the way out of our own forest. And I've found it very helpful, and I hope my clients have somewhat too. So that's all I had to say today. I wanted to thank Jen and the Chamber.
Thank you.
For
Well done.
having us.